Oblivion now, when you go enter an Oblivion gate, you're entering Marin's Dagon's realm. He's sort of, he's a god of destruction, and it's a fiery place. It's really hellish environment. The different Daedric princes, who each have their own plane of Oblivion, all have sort of a different theme. His is based on destruction, and that's why you see the sort of more classical, evil-looking hell-type realm. When you go into the Shivering Isles, it's a different experience. It's still a plane of Oblivion. It's not the real world as far as the game is concerned. You're not back on Earth, so to speak, but you're in this god's realm. But it's not, it's not hell. It's just a different place. It's a very different feel. It's a different atmosphere, and it's a completely different experience for the player.
Shivering Isles is the home of the Mad Daedric Prince Sheogorath. He called it that because that's what he wanted to call it. He probably doesn't need a better reason than that. It's actually a piece of Oblivion, Oblivion being the name for all of the planes that exist beyond that of Tamriel. And this is his home, and he's decided to call it the Shivering Isles. It's about a quarter of the size of the entire game of Oblivion. So we're talking about a substantial amount of gameplay here. It's a very large amount to give you in an expansion pack. Many of the other games that you see on the shelf don't have as many hours as our expansion pack has. So we feel very, very good about that. The main quest, I would estimate 20, 25 hours, and that's assuming you stick to it and you don't let yourself get sidetracked and you don't poke your nose in all the corners. If you were to do all the miscellaneous quests, if you were to look at all the dungeons, easily double, maybe triple that.
Again, the story takes place in Sheogorath's realm, and he's the Prince of Madness. He's pretty much put a call out and said he needs a champion. And the player goes into this fairly blind, not knowing what's going on. Without going into too much detail, the player meets Sheogorath and finds out there's a threat to the realm, that it's imminent. It's the end of the era. That's the main quest in Oblivion, was sort of about, it's, the Emperor is dead, it's the end of an era. Big changes tend to happen in our world at the end of each era. The same holds true in the Oblivion planes as well. And this is about one of those kind of world-changing or plane-changing events at the end of an era. So there's a threat to the realm, and Sheogorath, for reasons you find out as you play through, needs help solving this problem, and who better than the player to take care of that?
In terms of being crazy, initially in development, we probably swung the pendulum a little bit too far and realized that it's not a world you can actually play in, that being in a land of the insane or land of the mad had to have enough touchstones to what is real and what can be worked with in order to have a game there. Because if I have everybody just gibbering at you all the time because they're insane, what are you going to do? There's no game there. So we had to pull that back a little bit and say, okay, this is what being in the realm of the mad means. This is how it is. So it's a more subtle and nuanced version of mad. But every character has their own specified and unique idiosyncrasy. I'll call it that, or you could say it's a type of madness or insanity. Some are more severe than others. We even do have one guy who just gibbers at you. We actually wrote all the dialogue for that. But they all have unique dialogue pieces. When they're in conversations, their dialogue is appropriate for their particular idiosyncrasy, something that we didn't necessarily do in Oblivion because of the extreme number of characters we have. They would share dialogue more often. Here, they don't share dialogue very often at all.
When we talked about designing the different areas and the lands of mania, we said we wanted them to be bright and vibrant and oversaturated and really just sort of jump out at the player, and these colors would just hit you in the face. And one of the first things we thought of was Alice in Wonderland. You think of these, it's this fantastical place where things are just a bit askew. Everything's a little too bright and a little too loud, and we wanted to capture a bit of that for at least half of the world. In the other half, we were thinking we wanted to be claustrophobic and a little bit scary, and voices coming out of nowhere, and strange mists over the water, and kind of capture that, a bit of that, almost a survival horror type feel to it. Obviously it's not that kind of game, but that kind of atmosphere in the other part of the world. So there were a number of different influences that went into the creation of this.
Actually, a lot of stuff we kind of look. This is kind of strange, but we kind of look back to Morrowind because we knew we wanted it to be a little bit higher fantasy. We were trying to describe the world of a god, and we wanted it to be visually different from Oblivion. So we looked back to some of the stuff we'd done before, that was a big inspiration. We wanted some more colors and some more exaggerated high fantasy feeling, but we also wanted to mix it in with somewhat real-world elements, so it didn't feel like too much of a departure from the content that's in Oblivion.
When you play an expansion, you want to see new stuff. It's telling a new story isn't enough. You've got to have new toys to play with in your sandbox. So there are a ton of new weapons, a ton of new armor sets. We've got a bunch of new creatures, and the creatures all have some variety too. Depending on where in the world you find them, they're going to look different than they normally would. We've brought back some old creatures that were in Morrowind, or all the way back to Daggerfall. And we've got some brand new creatures that we dreamed up for this new realm that we're dealing with. So there's a nice variety for players. Even if you've spent 200 hours playing Oblivion already, this is going to be a complete departure. We didn't want to use anything from the main game in this expansion material. We've talked about how the only things that are reused are things like carrots. We didn't do the carrot of madness at any point. So, but beyond that, it's all new stuff. The creatures are new, the architecture's new, the dungeons are new. So it's going to be a completely different experience for the player.
Potions, we have a whole bunch of new ingredients. That's probably the biggest area. Because we had all this new plant life, we have a whole bunch of new ingredients that are available, and they work just fine with the old ingredients, mix and match, however you want. So those people who are into alchemy, they're going to be in for a real treat because they all of a sudden have all this new stuff that they can play with. And they're going to find that some potions are now easier to make than they were before because they can get ingredients from the Shivering Isles that were more difficult to obtain with the same functions in Cyrodiil. And there are some new spells. The spell system had been expanded pretty well in Oblivion. So there isn't as many new spells as there's, say, new ingredients, but you can summon some of the new creatures, for example. That's probably one of the more interesting things you can do.
So one of the things from the beginning we wanted to do is kind of make everything on a bigger scale. You'll notice the trees are huge, the buildings are a lot taller and more imposing, and the creatures kind of follow the same aesthetic. So the creatures are a little bit bigger, and we built spaces around them so that they felt like they lived in this environment. But yeah, they are a bit stranger. They come from Sheogorath's mind, so it was a different idea. Oblivion was a lot of, well, what could live in a real world or in a forest, or and then some more classic fantasy creatures, but this was a lot stranger in setting.
Shivering Isles is going to be a great capstone to our game. It's going to be a great way for you to say, yes, I've played all and the best of everything that Bethesda Softworks has to offer. And I think our customers are going to be really excited by it, and I look forward to getting all the wonderful letters and emails from everybody telling me how absolutely wonderful it is.
Well, look who's here. You! How about that?